my teachings, I've underscored the criticality of maintaining command over our emotions and impulses. Unchecked, these can lead us astray, resulting in regrettable decisions. Yet upon reflection, I've come to realize that the strategies I've imparted serve merely as basic tools for management or neutralization. While helpful, they alone cannot instill the unwavering confidence and authority needed to govern our emotional responses. However, in this video, I will elucidate the singularly potent method by which you can attain the mastery and dominance required, nurturing your capacity for rationality. Looking back, you may ponder, aren't we inherently rational beings distinct from animals? Indeed, we are. Nonetheless, our brains retain primitive instincts that prioritize emotions, predating the development of the neocortex responsible for cognitive functions. Emotions remain a fundamental focus for our brains. Consequently, many of us frequently make decisions and assessments subconsciously, solely influenced by our personal feelings about the situation. To cultivate the mental capacity to regulate our emotions and enhance our rationality, we must dedicate time and effort to training and practice. The first thing we need to do is to become fully and acceptably aware of our own impulsive and emotional nature. Emotions originate as chemical reactions and sensations that are biologically designed to capture our attention and take sharp notice of our environments, onto which we are intrigued enough to want to understand where they come from and interpret them into language. However, because they are processed in different parts of the brain from our cognitive functions, most of us don't get to know where they come from or the reason why we react as such to them, making our interpretation of our own emotions oftentimes inaccurate and vivid. That is why oftentimes we do not know the exact reason why we feel angry from people who think that controlling our emotions means that we should completely shut down our reception to our own emotions like a robot. No, absolutely not. You cannot completely separate yourself from your emotions. It is utterly impossible. You cannot fully separate your feelings from being involved in making decisions. Even the most rational people of them all are unable to do so. However, what makes rational people different from most of us and more effective and successful in decision-making than us is that they have a deep sense of introspection to deduct emotions substantially from their thinking and counteract their effect. Their sense of awareness is what makes them able to vigilantly control their impulses. Irrational people, on the other hand, have no such awareness. They always rush into conclusions and make decisions based on whatever accommodates the needs of their emotional biases that also soothe their egos. You can actually distinguish someone who is rational or irrational, or at the very least, notice which one they're more inclined to or dominant by simply through the nature of the decision-making. Rational people do what needs to be done. Irrational people do what they feel like doing, which today often comes in the form of defensive excuses to avoid responsibilities. The existing nature of our impulsive irrationality is below our own level of consciousness. That is why it is difficult for us to become innately aware of them operating. However, although we may not be conscious of its nature, we can be conscious of its activity, scratching the surface through our physical responses and reactions. This is how you develop that awareness. Pay attention. I've talked about emotional trigger points before, but never in a way that is descriptive enough to help you become more mindful by noticing behavior from yourself that is suddenly off character and moments where you can feel a sense of emotional pressure, brittleness, and leakage. Usually, it is in the physical sensation of a sudden buildup of tears, a difficulty to swallow, a heavy feeling on your chest, a sudden hesitancy to speak or muttering up words, and your immediate mental withdrawal from a situation, that is, inadvertently went into a brief and sudden self-reflection mode, and/or you shift your focus away from the circumstance by slightly looking down or sideways. You essentially circumvent those triggers, a subtle accumulating sense of sensitivity, vulnerability, anxiety, agitation, irritation, and stress that momentarily disconnects you from your senses. You also tend to freeze, shudder, stop whatever it is that you are doing, or even get sloppy, careless, and unaware of what you are doing during these moments. These low-grade emotions will slowly compel you to react and, if further provoked or remain unchecked, can turn into high-grade emotions where you will completely enter into tunnel vision and culminate into unsupervised rash actions like when we experience strings of losses or defeats. we often start to feel that we are somehow eternally cursed for misfortunes. This can get us to become extremely fearful, hesitant, and nervous, and become more prone to making even more mistakes and experience more failures. When you finally become aware, dig deep into the source of your weaknesses and irrationality, and conscious of your trigger points that create all those subtle tendencies. This is where you must bring yourself to withdraw physically and completely from the situation, especially in the beginning or if you are a beginner. Find yourself a place where you can be alone, like the bathroom or your own room, and focus on trying to dig deep into those trigger points to see where they originate from. It is much better to display some situational awkwardness through physical withdrawal, especially when there are people around you, than to utterly embarrass yourself. You need to constantly practice, as the more you are able to imminently step back and assess yourself, the easier it will be to eventually tame your emotions without having to physically remove yourself. Now, this is where the challenge can be quite substantial for most of us, especially if you've never done a deep, raw, and brutal introspection into the roots of your own weaknesses. Our rationality is able to innately recognize, eyes, and acknowledge our discrepancies, but our ego and irrationality prevents it from ever being brought into full consciousness again. Pain versus pleasure. The reason why you experience all those understated sensations is because you have a vivid notification of your own weaknesses, but your ego decides against them ever being taken out of their shelves, thus creating the mental friction within your mind, resulting in your failure to effectively interpret those weaknesses and master your response towards them being provoked. Your biggest enemy and challenge here is bringing your ego to come to terms with the reality of your circumstances, instead of allowing it to maintain favorable and soothing illusions about yourself, your weaknesses, the root of your major high-end emotions. Especially in today's age, they all originate from a collection of underlying unresolved insecurities. Provocations of our insecurities get us to go into a protective or defensive state, as they are innately perceived as existential threats to our need for self-esteem, either from the social and/or our own perception of ourselves. Acknowledging and accepting your deep-rooted insecurities and being able to dissect and pinpoint their origins will be the key to you eventually recognizing with clarity their components and pattern to the surface objectively and achieve and understand something gives us the sense of control and confidence that we so desperately need towards the chaos and unpredictability of our circumstances, and a high degree of our rationality allows us to achieve that state. We all have our own insecurities. That is what makes us human. No matter how godly or untouchable someone appears to be, they have their weaknesses. They are just way more viscerally aware and understanding of them, to the point where they have become proficiently capable to stop it surfacing for other people to notice and take advantage of. Rationality and irrationality, reason and emotion, can be likened to riders and horses. The horse represents our emotional side, embodying power, energy, and passion. Meanwhile, the rider symbolizes our rational side, characterized by restraint, control, and direction. Alone, the horse runs wild, aimlessly, and destructively, while the rider remains lifeless, inactive, and stagnant. However, when they collaborate harmoniously, they unleash remarkable productivity and accomplish amazing feats, operating effectively and objectively. The development of rationality requires consistent practice and growth. It is not an innate trait. Prioritize assessing every situation with rationality to reach an objective conclusion or decision. With clear understanding and confidence in your course of action, your perspective shifts, influencing your emotional response accordingly. As you gain clarity and your ego aligns with the reality of your situation, your initial negative emotions will shift into a surge of positive feelings, brimming with enthusiasm. This process effectively harnesses and channels emotions to your advantage, serving as a catalyst for momentum. Emotions offer the building blocks for sound reasoning, while reasoning offers the tools to leverage productive emotions. Thank you for watching.